Great Remix is finally back, and today, trainers, we're gonna take a look at more than 10 teams that you can use in that format pretty much effectively. These Pokemon that I have over here will not be allowed, so shout out to LeakDuck for giving out this infographic, and I think that we have some pretty neat contenders here because Medicham and Galarian Stunfisk are two Pokemon that most likely you are never gonna see in the Open Great League anymore, but still they made up to this list. Also, I want to mention that no Glygars are off the Great League Remix, which means that we might actually be able to use that Pokemon on one or more of our teams today. So let's start off with the first team showcase as we're getting a look at a Gligar team. Yeah, that was a hint. So Gligar with Red Steel and Pelipper. These three can provide so much pressure on the opponent. They already have quite the variety of marks on PvP. You can see the ranks being A, B, A, B, and of course you can look how good they can be over the entire meta. You're gonna have a lot of soft losses. This is pretty understandable, but the main reason that I'm using PvP lately is to see the potential threats. Over here I can see which Pokemon from the entire meta can hurt my team. So at this point I want to mention that you are not gonna have a lot of core breakers. You can use this team either with Gligar up in front or Red Steel, but I really like Gligar because of its ability to be extremely neutral against the entire meta. Of course you can use Red Steel and play this team as ABB with double flying at the back, so it's always up to you. Over here we can clearly see that something like a Mountain can provide a lot of pressure on Gligar, but to be fair the backline can really make up for this, and especially Red Steel. Pelipper is a safe pick that we can always count on, with its nuke being Hurricane, a neutral move against almost the entire meta of Great League Remix. Also, the most severe threat that I found about this team might be actually Aurorus. This Pokemon with its rock typing can definitely destroy down your Pelipper if you are not careful with a simple Meteor Beam, while also charging up its attack stat even further. But to be fair, it is pretty weak to those weather balls, and of course as long as you can have the perfect matchup against it with your Red Steel, you're gonna be just fine. So enough about this first team, now let's keep going into the next one with a Carbink team. So Carbink is a Pokemon that not a lot of people love, but still makes up on those ranks of every single special cap that it is allowed, and let's see how this is gonna go because we're having a Carbink up in front, followed up by Gallade and Mandibuzz. I really like Shadow Gallade here, but we're gonna take a look at the regular one because you might actually need that little of extra bulk on your Gallade to get to another Leaf Blade, to another close combat, and be even more lethal towards your opponents. So this team gets pretty high on those ranks on PvP. You can see here the variety of matchups that you can get throughout the top contenders of Great League Remix, but once again we're gonna check out the potential threats. Over here we can see that Toxapex might actually pose a threat to our team, but to be fair you can always count on your backline for Toxapex. Even your Gallade can provide so much pressure with a back-to-back and even to back Leaf Blades, I mean 3 Leaf Blades coming off your Pokemon before they even reach to a charge attack, sometimes, not always. So yeah, the poison jab damage can always add up against your Gallade, but the other two Pokemon can definitely handle the pressure. Both Carbink and Mandibuzz are two pure tanks that can protect your Gallade even further in the Great League Remix meta. So besides that, I do not think you're gonna find any other notable core breaker for this team besides Clefable, I guess, but still, who's gonna use that Pokemon? I definitely have no clue at all. Perhaps if this team becomes super popular, Clefable can be a notable core breaker, but till then this team is gonna perform pretty nicely. So Empoleon teams now are not gonna be pretty easy to build on this meta because of a lot of fighting existing at the same time, but when you find the perfect team for Empoleon, you're gonna see that you're gonna have the time of your life, and this team can absolutely make up for it. So we're having Empoleon up in front, having at the back Hitmontop with Dragonair. I really like Dragonair here as a safe switch, especially on Shadow. We saw before that there is no Dragonair Dragonair on the list, so we can easily use it here on the Great League Remix format, while Hitmontop will remain as a closer with the counters and perhaps the triple axles to vamp up your attack stat. And if the shields are down, well, a simple close combat can do even lethal damage to neutral Pokemon, so you can always count on your Hitmontop towards the end game, especially if you have the shield advantage. And speaking of shields, Dragonair can provide so much pressure on a lot of teams with its Dragon Breath coming from a Shadow Pokemon. So over here you can see the overview with the ranks. It doesn't look much, but still it has so much potential with the variety of the typings that we have on this team and also the moves that you can throw. I really like this team, I really recommend to you, even though it doesn't look much on paper and on PvP. So the potential threats are gonna be Mandibuzz most probably, but you can always count on your Pokemon with a little bit of synergy to provide even more pressure to that Mandibuzz threat. I would say that Jellicent is most probably the worst Pokemon that you can face with this team, because it can simply destroy down Empoleon and wall down Hitmontop, while against Dragonair your charge attacks are gonna be just useless, but still the Shadow Dragon Breath damage is gonna add up over time and you're gonna see that you have a ton of coverage even up against Jellicent with a little bit of extra synergy. Into the next one now, and the Metal Trash Can will come into the game. So we're having now Registeel here up in front, having at the back Mountain with Diggersby. Perhaps for this individual team you want to lead with Mountain over Registeel because you want to aggressively draw out the fighter with your Diggersby or your Registeel. Pick one of the two as your main safe switches. They both have a chance to debuff the opponent either with the Zap Cannon or the Scorching Suns, while Hyper Beam and Focus Blast or even Zap Cannon on its own can be your main nukes to destroy down your opponents. So I really like this team, easy to draw out the fighter and then have the upper hand with Mountain and Registeel or Diggersby, whatever remains at the back. You can see the ranks here are pretty high, and also we have the potential threats being so weird. So we're having Ho-Oh as a potential threat, which doesn't make a lot of sense. You can always destroy down that Pokemon even with Scorching Suns because of how frail it can be. It is a legendary Pokemon, pretty strong on Master League, but here on Great League super frail. I do not think you're gonna see another huge score breaker for this one, especially when you lead with Mountain, because when you aggressively switch in there with your Diggersby or your Registeel, not only the fighters but also the Mad Boys can appear across you, so you can always bait out either a fighter or a Mad Boy, and Mountain can finish off eventually that threat, so the other Pokemon remaining at the back can finish off your opponents. Now we have a Swampert team on its own. So Swampert up in front, the Dean at the back with Toxapex. Swampert is always weak to those grass types, and today trainers we're gonna check out a team that can provide extra coverage for that on the backline, especially with Toxapex. So Swampert, not only those grass types can destroy it, but also the dragon types, so that's why we also have a fairy type on our backline. So here comes now a potential threat for this team, and that is Ferrothorn. Are you gonna see any Ferrothorns out there? Perhaps, who knows, this Pokemon is always great on special caps, but if you happen to see no Ferrothorns at all, besides that you're gonna have quite the fun time on your own, because Toxapex can be used as a closer while your main safe switch has to be the Dean over here. The Dean has access to moves like Play Rough, which can provide extra coverage to a lot of Pokemon. It is a fairy type to protect you from those dragons, and also has access to Discharge to destroy the enemy competition, especially with that Jellicent threat. So besides Ferrothorn, I don't see any other weird incident that you want to have another big core breaker for this team. So let's move forward now into the next one, as we're having Walrein returning into Go Battle League. This Pokemon was long lost in Go Battle League, and of course today I want to give it a shot on the Sim teams of PvP, and I was really impressed of how good it can be towards the entire meta of Great League Remix. So over here we're gonna use it with its standard moveset, having at the back Runerigus and Surfetched. Those two at the back line are gonna provide so much coverage for the entire meta, and also Runerigus seems like the perfect safe closer that you need. Has access to moves like Santum and Shadow Ball, but also I think that you can count on it after a few debuffs with the Santum, especially with that Shadow Claw. Now with Surfetched as our safe switch, kinda, you can always destroy down some water types with a Leaf Blade, or just go with a close combat to destroy down something like a Registeel that might be up against you, and especially up in front for your wall rain. So I really like this team. Has access to a backline that can protect Registeel for your wall rain actually from Registeel and Carbing, while it can also provide extra coverage towards the entire meta of Remix. Superior here in theory can be a core breaker because wall rain is a grass type, but at the same time those Icicle Spears and the Powder Snows can provide so much pressure on that Pokemon. Charizard on the other hand is a Pokemon, and the Pokemon that I am mostly afraid of, because with shields this one can absolutely finish us off, can outspeed us to those Shadow Balls with Runerigus, has deadly charge attacks for both of our wall rain and Surfetched. So yeah, you can always see how Charizard can be a severe threat to us, but also it is super frail, so with a little bit of synergy you can always overcome even the obstacle of Charizard. Into the next one now with a Molga team. This could always be a Shadow Zapdos line, but I think that Emolga is a more accessible Pokemon for you, so feel free to use it with care, because the backline is gonna protect you from a lot of threats, and of course Steelix has to be your number one priority when it comes down to safe switch. This Pokemon has access to Breaking Swipe, to Earthquake, Psychic Fangs and Crunch, 4 moves that can always be debatable on which ones to use. I think that Dragon Tail, Crunch and Psychic Fangs though might be actually the moveset that you want to have on Steelix. If you're seeing though a lot of Registeels, which I do not think so to be fair due to that typing of fighting being everywhere, but anyways, if you see a lot of Registeels, feel free to replace your Psychic Fangs with something like an Earthquake to destroy down that opposing Steel type. Poliwrath now can always be used on Shadow mode, pretty much like Steelix, but I think that the regular Poliwrath might actually give you a little bit of extra bulk for this team, because Steelix is not the bulkiest Pokemon ever, but can still take the hits. You have access to Emolga, which is a pretty frail Pokemon, so Poliwrath on the end game might actually help you a lot. I would not recommend going for Scald here, just replace it with something like a Dynamic Punch for example, and you're gonna see that you might actually have more coverage for this team. So overall now let's see the ranks that we get. All Bs, which is pretty great if you ask me. I like B teams from PvP, they provide so much more entertainment in Go Battle League, and over here you can also see that we have Jellicent once again emerging as a potential threat. So Jellicent is most probably the most notable off-meta Pokemon of Great League Remix. I really think that you need to be afraid of it, especially later on this week, but at the same time you can always play around it with your discharges. You have access to Crunch with Steelix, or just go ahead and go with both of those Pokemon up against Jellicent, but no matter what you do, leave aside your Poliwrath. You do not want to face Jellicent with your Poliwrath. Whatever you do is gonna be resisted, whatever you throw. So enough about this team, enough flattering here, and speaking of Jellicent, we're gonna have another Jellicent, this time up in front for our next team composition. Registeel as well with Jumbluff. This team might look kinda bulky. We have a lot of tanks on the same line. We have a lot of bulk which can survive a lot of super effective moves, moves even, and of course we're gonna be able to debuff our opponents with certain moves, while at the same time we got a lot of nukes from all of our Pokemon. Surprisingly, this team doesn't get all A's. If I were PvP, perhaps I would give it for this one, because I really like how versatile this team can be. So once again, straight to the potential threats, and Bellibolt here, Pyroar, Galvantula, Ho-Oh, or even Registeel can be core breakers for this team. But to be fair, Registeel is the most notable core breaker, which is something that you can still count on with your team, because Registeel needs a lot of time to get to those charge attacks. They're never gonna be enough to one-shot any of your Pokemon, so feel free to rely on synergy between your picks, and even Registeel will not be a threat to your own Registeel team. If I were you, I would be more afraid about Pidgeot, because Jellicent, if it faces Pidgeot up in front, needs to stay in. Your Registeel is your main answer to that Pidgeot, while Jellicent is gonna struggle a lot, but still you have another Pokemon that struggles against Pidgeot, and that is Jumpluff. No matter what you do, just leave room for your Jumpluff to any Pokemon out there besides Flying and Fire, because those two are gonna destroy you down. Now let's keep going with the Quagsire team. So Quagsire was not banned. That was a surprise, because I was thinking that Remix could ban Quagsire. I was seeing a lot of Quagsires on my Great League battles the past few seasons, so yeah, I would not be surprised if it could make the list. But anyways, it is here, it is allowed on Remix, and we're gonna use it alongside Pidgeot and Shadow Machamp. We saw Pidgeot before as a core breaker, how good it can be against the anti-off meta options, and that is because it can destroy down the competition, especially up against those ghost types. I really like Machamp on Shadow here. You can always use it up in front with this team, relying on Quagsire as a safe switch with Mud Bomb and Stone Edge, but PvP recommends going for Aqua Tail. So for the sake of this video, I will go for the Aqua Tail, because you might have it already from its community day, and perhaps you do not want to miss on that move. So yeah, Aqua Tail and Stone Edge for Quagsire for this team. But if I were you, perhaps I would use the other version with Mud Bomb and Stone Edge, because you get extra coverage against steel types, and you might actually need that. So anyways, let's see the ranking. You get A on coverage, D on bulk, which makes a ton of sense. Safety and consistency pretty average, and now we're having the potential threats. Bronzong is a Pokemon that can beat you down. Well, that's interesting. So let's replace this move, the Aqua Tail, with Mud Bomb just for a second to see something, to check something. I think that you're gonna have a much healthier environment here with the core breakers. Of course, Mountain is gonna be here, but with Stone Edge you are still gonna be fine, and Gligar emerges out of nowhere. So yeah, Aqua Tail might actually be a better option for you with this team, because you already have Machamp, which is pretty weak to that Gligar, but with Aqua Tail you get extra coverage even for Gligar with your Quagsire. So besides Bronzong, I don't think so. Besides Mountain here or Pelipper, you're gonna be just fine. This team has pretty much quite what it takes to destroy down the entire Great League Remix. I think you got some pretty nice synergy between the picks, and of course a lot of coverage with the moves. Let's see now the next one with a Gazelle up in front, followed up by Toxicroak and Toxapex. This team is pretty toxic, right? Without having any toxic move in between its picks. So now with Dragon Tail, with counter and poison jabs, these are gonna be some of the best actually fast attacks that you can use for your battles in Great League Remix, the most pressuring ones, and of course we're gonna be looking at almost an A team. So this takes all Bs, but here in consistency we got A, which is pretty great. Now with Clodsire being the #1 threat according to PvP, I still think you have a lot of chances with this team, because Guzzlord might actually be a perfect Pokemon for the entire meta. It is pretty much afraid of fairy types and fighters. Fairy types not so much because they're not gonna be around much, but still the fighters are gonna be. So here is where the backline can come into play. If I were you, I would be more afraid about the Toxic Rock lead, because even Toxapex is gonna struggle a lot against that Pokemon. Even though you already have it well up in front, it is always gonna have the upper hand with energy if you are not careful, so you need to play accordingly on this one. Any other severe threat? I do not think so. Even Frostlass here, which makes the list or as the core breaker, I still think you can count on your Guzzlord under shielding to destroy it down with some Dragon Tails, because Guzzlord might look like a thick beast but also has so much pressure on its skill set with a Dragon Tail, especially if you can land the debuff with your crunch. Now we got a Steelix team before we head into the final one, alongside Poliwrath and Tropius. Those two at the back can provide a lot of coverage against the entire Great League Remix. We do not have a no-lay team, but still it kinda makes up to it. BAAB on PvP, and also you can see here that Honda might actually hunt us down. However, Honda is not gonna be a contender at all in Great League Remix. I would not be that worried about that Pokemon. Even Red Steel can easily be handled by Poliwrath, while you have kind of an even matchup with Steelix if you use something like an Earthquake, for example. And I do not think that I can find any other weakness for this team, at least not a notable one, not something that you cannot spare with this team. I think that Steelix up in front is gonna require a lot of sacrifices, because it's gonna be used as a Pokemon that you want to use it pretty much as a punching bag, even though you are afraid of those fighters. So Steelix is gonna debuff the opponent by a lot. You have access to Tropius, which can be used as a closer, while Poliwrath with its debuffing moves will once again be the perfect safe switch for your team. Now let's head into the final team showcase with a Mantine up in front, Swampert at the back, and Regirock as our closer. So I think that Swampert is a mediocre safe switch, but you can always count on it if you have something like a Sludge Wave. Earthquake, by all means you can use it, but on the switch I really like to use as a safe pick my Swampert with Sludge Wave to surprise all of those grass types. But to be fair, even Earthquake can be used instead, which makes more sense for a lot of picks towards that Great League Remix. So here comes now the ranking. We're having a perfect ranking almost, and now towards the potential threats, of course Jellicent once again will remain here. So I would not be that much worried about Jellicent. You can see some other notable threats for this team, and I would be more worried about Empoleon rather than Jellicent, and that's mainly because of Steelwing. Steelwing can do so much damage on your Regirock. One Hydro Cannon in the process can finish you down, while it can resist pretty much with its Steel typing whatever you throw with your Mantine. Also, you have some moves with Regirock and Swampert that can one-shot down Empoleon, but if they have shields, things can go sideways. If you see a lot of Empoleons, do not use this team. If you play with another team, see 0 Empoleons, just use this team and algorithm will be triggered. But jokes aside, this team has no other severe weakness, only Empoleon can stop it, and of course you can count a lot on the bulk of Mantine and Regirock, while Swampert can emerge here as the perfect closer for your team. So that is gonna be all for today's content. How many teams? 12, 13? Well, we did a lot. Did you enjoy today's content? Write down in the comment section. I really want to see your reaction to this entire thing. And once again, we're gonna see here which Pokemon are not gonna be allowed. Alongside Great League Remix, Ultra League will be here, so perhaps you want to give it a shot if this format is not for you. But to be fair, I think that Great League Remix is pretty balanced, has access to a lot of Pokemon that you cannot use normally, or at least equally effectively on Open Great League, so there goes that. Thank you for watching, trainers, and for staying till the end. Before you go, leave a huge like, subscribe to my content, and I hope to see you all into the next one.